Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are so excited to have you a part of this conversation today. As you get in and get settled, we'll give folks just a minute or so to get in to the webinar before we get started. But again, so excited to have you all here with us this afternoon or morning, if you're joining us from the West Coast. Hello, hello to everyone joining us. We're going to get started in just about 30 seconds, just allowing folks to get logged in and settled. But again, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited for today's discussion. Right, it looks like we have a good amount of folks here with us today. I want to respect your time, so we'll go ahead and kick off. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the second session of Increasing Quality, Quantity, and Diversity webinar series. Today's webinar is hosted by the 1 Million Teachers of Color campaign and is one of 5 compelling sessions designed to disseminate best practices for cultivating and retaining diverse educators. We are extremely grateful that each of you made the choice to be here today for today's important conversation, and we hope that it helps you continue to serve your students, educators, and community more equitably. As we go through today's content, our team will post and drop important links in the chat to resources that support this discussion. This session is also recorded, which will be provided to you at the end of the webinar. And finally, we are going to share a link to today's feedback survey, as we deeply value your perspective in keeping these sessions relevant, actionable, and supportive to your educator diversity efforts. Our work today is urgent. Nationally, we have seen the headlines about widespread teacher shortages and how the education sector has been grappling with these challenges. But as school systems respond to the staffing issues in front of them, it's really important to acknowledge that those challenges are symptoms of a larger problem. The current crisis has reinforced fundamental questions about our approach to staffing classrooms and the value proposition of teaching as a viable career. We have known for decades that the combination of low compensation, toxic cultures, and poor career growth opportunities continues to push talented people of color away from teaching, a trend that is only accelerating amid the great reshuffle and a lack of investment in accessible, high-quality teacher preparation programs. The Learning Policy Institute also conducted a study that found that replacing a teacher typically costs around $20,000. This adds up to $3.2 million annually in a district with 160 teacher changes. We know that district leaders can't address these long-term challenges on their own, nor should they have to. Teacher shortages affect every corner of our society and economy because teachers help prepare the next generation of workers for every other industry. Our public and private sector leaders at every level need to acknowledge what's happening in public education right now and act accordingly. In 2012, TNTP released The Irreplaceables, a report highlighting how school leaders often missed opportunities to retain high-performing teachers, including those from diverse backgrounds. The report recommended low-cost strategies to develop and keep these valuable educators. These strategies are as simple as letting a teacher know that you value them and you want them to stay. Following this report, TNTP developed the Instructional Culture Insight Surveys. These surveys collect perception data from teachers and other stakeholders helping to create safe, collaborative, and inclusive school environments that provide every student, regardless of background, with a strong academic foundation. The Insight Teacher Survey, validated by the American Institutes for Research and RAND, is a reliable predictor of student achievement and teacher retention. Over 220,000 teachers have taken this survey, sharing that their school experiences, including whether they've encountered the recommended retention strategies and their anticipated tenure at their current school. After over a decade of us surveying teachers, we took a closer look at our data set to assess the ongoing impact of these strategies on retaining diverse educators across the country. What we found is that making an effort to retain teachers still makes a significant difference. Simple retention strategies can have a measurable impact on whether these teachers stay. For instance, when school leaders explicitly encourage their educators of color to stay, it matters. Our research shows that when principals go from not using any retention strategies to implementing at least one, retention rates jump from 62% to 73%. This demonstrates that the biggest difference maker is effort. When school leaders take even small steps to retain their teachers, especially those from diverse backgrounds, it positively impacts teachers' perceptions and actual retention rates, fostering a more inclusive and stable educational environment. And I share all this with you to say that we can't do everything, but we can do more than nothing. As you orient yourselves to the discussion today, we want you to see yourselves as active participants in the changes that we are seeking collectively. I know that we're in a webinar format today, but this is not your typical sit and get opportunity. Think deeply about your sphere of influence when it comes to transforming the existing conditions of education today and what you can take back to your local communities. Edward Everett Hale reminds us to focus on what we can control and act. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do. Speaking of what we can control, we believe that the sum of us can collectively change these conditions through the 1 Million Teachers of Color campaign. The campaign seeks to grow the ranks of our nation's teachers of color by 1 million and leaders of color by 30,000 over the next decade through a broad cross-sector coalition to advocate for change at every level. The campaign's primary objectives will be achieved through 3 key strategies. The first is advocating for policy change and stronger policy implementation at the federal, state, and local levels. The second is building a national narrative to influence public opinion about the urgency and importance of educator diversity. And the third is disseminating best practice research and solutions to inform the field and establish networks of aligned champions. The campaign is led by a steering committee, which includes leading experts from across 8 organizations. You can learn more about our partners and funders by visiting the campaign website. My name is Dr. Stephanie Tomlinson, Director of Advocacy Engagement at TNTP, and it is my pleasure to facilitate and moderate today's discussion. Over the next hour, we hope to help you think more expansively about retaining educators of color and exploring how retention can also help bring more diverse educators into the field. We'll begin with a case study to share some best practices from the field and then transition to a panel discussion with our lovely panelists to explore this issue on a deeper level. Please be sure to get those notebooks out, take note of any questions you may have or learnings that's coming up for you, because we will have an interactive Q&A portion for you to participate in. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to pass the mic over to Mrs. Jody Graham and Dr. Eric Pruitt from Ankeny Community School District in Iowa to share more about how they are approaching retention in their district.
Thank you, Stephanie. Again, really happy to be here sharing our practice and hopefully contribute to recruiting and retaining more staff in our respective districts. And so I want to start with our guiding framework here in Ankeny Community School District. It starts with our strategic plan, our graduate profile, and our DEI framework. We have 3 pillars within our strategic plan. The first one is rigorous and relevant academics. The second is talented people. And the third is supportive environments. And then I'm going to focus on 2 within the second one within our strategic plan, talented people. Here in Ankeny, we understand that people are the ones that drive the work in our district, and having effective people that are focused on working together for the benefit of students is our most important asset. And not only recruiting them, but also retaining them within our system. However, we also understand if we want to maintain them within our school district, we have to have a culture and climate that is conducive for not only the recruitment, but also keeping those people in our district that are willing to work with our students and families, and then also grow in their respective roles within our district and potentially outside of our district. Our third guiding framework with regards to our work around retaining people is our DEI framework. Simply, our DEI framework focuses on leadership, instructional practices, and parent and family engagement. We clearly understand that leadership drives what goes on in our schools, whether it's in the boardroom with the superintendent, down to the classroom with our teachers and support staff with our students. In addition to the instructional practices that we're attempting to implement across the entire district, and understanding that this is a partnership with our parents and families in our respective communities. At this time, I'm going to pass it on to my team member, Mrs. Jody Graham, who's going to talk about how Pillar 2, along with the DEI framework, live out in our work, not only in our HR department, but throughout our entire district. Jody?
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt. I'm excited to share with you some of the things that we have engaged in this last year. And my goal is to just give you a very broad overview of the things that we have been working on, and most specifically kind of share our why with you. So the first one is we hosted our first Educator Empowerment Conference. This is something we will continue to do annually, but we had our kickoff this last year. And we had 2 objectives in our kind of dream for this conference. First and foremost, we believe that we have an obligation and an interest in investing in our pre-service students and investing in our education profession. So we wanted to provide a workshop with hands-on tools that future educators could use to be more equipped for their first job and therefore find more success in the field. The second purpose of our conference was to really showcase who Ankeny is. We live in a world today where it is an employee market. Employees are shopping to find organizations that match their personal values. And we wanted to showcase in Ankeny, we believe in learning and we believe in the importance of teacher growth. And so this conference really featured the learning that our teachers are engaging in and how as a community we support the growth of each other. So we specifically had teacher leaders, instructional coaches, and principals lead our workshop and facilitate the sessions. We had super good feedback from this event and are excited to expand it this next year and make it even larger. The second thing that we engaged in this year, which is not new to education, is we hosted a para to educator seminar. And again, our why was to bring resources to our employees. So we brought in 4 colleges and universities, both in-state and out of state, that all had different types of kind of accelerated teacher prep programs specifically designed for paraeducators. And again, our goal, this is not a new concept to education, but our goal was to remove barriers and bring the resources directly to our employees. A third activity we've engaged in for a couple years now is our employee wellness fair. We really have been working hard over the last couple years to bring community resources, not only in Ankeny, but also in the Des Moines metro area, that support the physical, emotional, social, and financial well-being of our employees. Again, the goal is to remove barriers. How can we help bring resources into our employees to help them with different components of their life? We know that when employees are doing well personally, they're going to do better in the workforce, and they're going to be performing better when they're coming into work. So it's important for us to help match them and connect them with resources in our community and in the metro area. Another area of focus for us is with our student-teacher partnerships. We do things just a little bit different in Ankeny with student teachers. We ask that our student teachers go through an application and interview process. And we do this because we want to host student teachers that want to be in Ankeny. And it's an extra step that they go through, but it allows us to get to know them and specifically match them with a teacher leader in our district that is going to truly help support them through their journey as a student teacher and help them grow. So we invest time on the front end to get to know them, to ask some questions in that interview process, and then we are very strategic about matching them to a position, a teacher, a building, a community that we think will really help foster their growth and development. Another big initiative for us this year is we did a complete overhaul of our employee benefits. We have been giving out a benefit survey to our employees for several years. And we've been monitoring those survey results, but really haven't taken the initiative to make a massive change to meet some of the feedback that employees have been giving us. And so we went out to an RFP, and we completely are changing our insurance benefits for July 1 and really focusing on enhanced coverage. So what were our employees telling us that they needed more of in terms of insurance coverage? And then how could we match a plan to meet the different life stages of our employees? We have kind of fallen into a rut of a one size fits all. And so we are really challenging ourselves to be innovative and consider how can we provide benefits for different stages of life for our employees. And so I'm super excited to just share, this has been a seamless change for us. Our employees are very excited about the change, and we have received incredible feedback about the savings that they will experience because we are offering different plans for different stages of life. And then lastly, we are getting ready to launch a partnership with Culture Amp. We have a desire to learn what is true about our culture in Ankeny. We tend to hear a lot of things, but haven't really had the resources in place to know how pervasive is some of the stuff that our employees are saying. We've been working with our marketing team, and their perspective is that word of mouth marketing and telling our story is one of the most impactful pieces for recruitment and for retention. So our goal is to dive into this partnership with Culture Amp and learn what is true about our culture here in Ankeny, specifically sorting out differences between job satisfaction and maybe mishiring in terms of match and fit for positions, and what we have control over to improve for that work-life partnership balance between the district and our employees. So we're excited to start digging into this initiative and getting some data back so that we can start having discussions and identifying strategies to implement.
And the last thing that I want to say, other than if you're interested in coming to a district that is going to help you grow and you'll be able to contribute to a flourishing environment here in Ankeny, we understand the culture and the people that we have are, again, our most important resource. Mm-hmm. So thank you for listening, and look forward to the remainder of the webinar.
Thank you, Jody and Dr. Pruitt, for just sharing a little bit more what's happening in your district. I'd love for us to continue our conversation in a dynamic panel discussion. I encourage, again, participants to drop any questions that are coming up for you in the chat as you have them. We will have a live audience Q&A where panelists can speak to what's top of mind for you when you consider retaining diverse educators in your local context. So our distinguished panelists for this webinar include Jacob Guthrie, Director of Recruitment, Selection, and Retention at the Los Angeles Unified School District. We're bringing back Dr. Eric Pruitt, Superintendent of Schools at Ankeny Community School District, and Valerie Sakumura, Executive Director at Deans for Impact. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm going to just get us all here together and cozy so that we can see each other well. And I am going to have each of you make a brief introduction of yourselves, but also answer a question. So this first question is for you, Valerie. What are some of the hidden or less obvious challenges that aspiring educators of color face in today's educational landscape? How do you think we can uncover and address these subtle yet impactful barriers, and how do these challenges manifest differently across different pathways into teaching?
Thanks, Stephanie, and really glad to be here to talk about this, and really appreciative of the case study that we just heard about, because I think a lot of the things that you all were talking about are things that I think are really important. Just to give context on Deans for Impact, we're a national nonprofit that is working to ensure that every child has a well-prepared teacher. We're particularly focused on students who have historically had least access to really well-prepared teachers. So we work with policymakers and leaders of educator preparation programs and faculty and others that train teachers to ensure that pathways into teaching are accessible and affordable, practice-based, and really supporting new teachers to be equipped with evidence-based practices and able to make equitable instructional decisions for students. So often when I get asked about to speak about retention, I think there's some question about why an organization that's focused on preparation would talk about retention, but actually at Deans for Impact, we think that high quality preparation is a really critical retention lever. Research tells us that having comprehensive preparation experiences supports novice teachers to be 2 to 3 times more likely to stay in the profession. And so if you aren't thinking about preparation as a retention strategy, I think you're missing a big piece of the retention picture. Specifically as it relates to teachers of color, research has shown, for example, that Black female educators, the majority of them don't feel like preparation programs sufficiently prepare them for their roles. One thing we know is that teachers of color are twice as likely to enter through alternative pathways into teaching, often because those are less expensive or have a lower financial burden. And while the quality of these programs vary, and there are some that are really good, many of these programs have less intentionally structured supports and experiences to ensure that teachers are ready and equipped to be successful in the profession, which can lead to turnover. So I think sometimes we think about if we recruit a lot of folks into some of these programs, that we've solved the problem, but it's really important to be looking at related retention data for different preparation programs and feelings of preparedness for teachers coming out of those programs. I think another real barrier are financial barriers for aspiring teachers. We talked a little bit about the overall cost of programs, which is where things like scholarships and stipends can be really helpful. But there are all these kind of other costs that aspiring teachers bear, like the cost of licensure exams, for example, and test preparation, all those things that are important to be able to get them actually into classrooms. And then there are barriers that aspiring teachers of color face that mirror, I think, a lot of the barriers that in-service teachers of color face. So We heard in the Ankeny case study about climate and culture and that being a really important component of this work, and ensuring that schools are inclusive spaces for teachers of color. I think that's similar when we think about preparation experiences that aspiring teachers of color have, and making sure that those are affirming of the identities and experiences that teachers of color bring. So whether that is having faculty and staff that reflect a diversity of identities and engage in culturally responsive practices, or mentor teachers that can value and affirm the identities of teachers of color, or affinity spaces for aspiring teachers of color with protected time to be able to engage in those spaces. I think all of those things that we think about in terms of climate and culture that impact retention in the in-service space are also really important to think about in the pre-service space.
Thank you for sharing that, Valerie. And I am thinking a lot about how moving from pre-service into an in-service experience, how that manifests in practice. And so I am really curious to hear from you, Jacob, about any highlights of programs or initiatives that you think more schools knew about to help sort of drive this point home about what retention can look like in-service practice, and what made it particularly successful as you think about the context of your local school district.
Thank you, Dr. Tomlinson, and thank you everyone for being here and including me in this very important and rich conversation. I have the pleasure of serving as an HR director for our Black Student Achievement Plan in LAUSD, and we are proud of everything that we are doing here in LA Unified to not only support Black students, but our Black educators. I'll drop a link in the chat so that you can learn a little bit more about our program. What I wanted to talk about today, what I would hope that more of our schools could find out, and what this entire coalition could start building some momentum on, are grow your own programs that target our high school students. So often I get asked about how we can recruit and retain Black educators in particular, and we don't have to look any further than the classrooms that we have with our bright students that are already there. And so I am proud to be a part of the team that works on something called our Educators of Tomorrow program. And this is an initiative where we work with 7 of our high schools that have linked learning pathways in education, child development, or public service. And so those students are already learning about careers in these different sectors and skills that they might have as they begin to enter the workforce. And we have HR administrators go out to each of the schools and prepare them to take and pass the qualifying exams to be an instructional assistant or a paraprofessional, and then also work with them on the application, cutting through the red tape, reducing all of the barriers to entry into the profession. But more than anything else, and this is where it comes to retention and where I want to echo what Valerie says, the way that we bring people into the profession matters when it comes to retention. My brother Sharif El-Mekki always talks about, how are we inviting people into the profession? And for all of my Black students that are in those classrooms, I want them to know that HR wants them and that we see greatness in them. But not only that, it's not a one-stop shop, one visit. We have a scope and sequence that allows them to be invited and then feel supported all the way to them potentially becoming employees. And then we have vertical articulation thereafter that then allows them to achieve different career benchmarks. And so we will support them through college with tuition assistance and mentorship. We have a credentialing program that's in-house that allows them to earn a credential in a tuition waived environment, so that when they finally sign that contract to become a teacher, we've had a long-term relationship. We've already invested in them. They know multiple people within the organization that are giving them value and lifting up their voice. And so when it comes to teacher retention, it's not someone thinking that they might be walking away from an employer that they were with for a year. We've been doing this for quite some time. And so just to tie that up, we did some data analysis, And we were a bit underwhelmed at the number of Black students that we were serving through this program. And so we are going to have a pilot within the Black Student Achievement Program to make sure that we're providing equitable access to all of our students who might wish to participate.
Thank you for sharing that, Jacob. And I think building on something that you and Valerie have brought up in your responses just about culture and how that plays a huge role in retention. And so, Dr. Pruitt, I'm going to bring you back up into the fold, especially thinking about all the things that are happening in Ankeny Community School District. I'm curious to know, like, what role do you think district leadership plays in creating a supportive environment for educators of color? And one thing that I was also left wondering after your presentation is, how is Ankeny seeing the connection between your talent initiatives and educator diversity? Like, how are those two things coming together? And how does that play out in the space that you're creating for educators and why they stay?
Thank you for the question. And again, thank you for the invitation to just share our practice and learn from one another today. And so I believe that here in Ankeny, our context is just a little different from those larger urban centers across the nation. We're a suburban district north of Des Moines. Our student population is around 85% white, and we're in Iowa. And so recruitment is really important to us, in addition to retention. And so I believe in a district like Ankeny, in addition to any other school district, whether it be urban, rural, or suburban, community orientation that is implemented and incorporated into your onboarding process is a key factor in supporting teachers of color. And then I'm going to include our paraeducators, because we want to recruit paraeducators of color into our district also. And so how we help them understand the political landscape here in Ankeny, the demographics in Ankeny, and really just what goes on here is just really important for educators that want to come here and work with us, and more importantly with our students, is really important. Outside of the onboarding, the retention really, for me, really comes into play with regards to the mentorship opportunities that we provide here in Ankeny, in addition to coaching our teachers throughout the entire school year. This past school year, we incorporated a new professional learning series for all of our new teachers throughout the entire school year, in addition that included our mentors that supported them throughout the entire school year. I think another part of ensuring that our teachers of color feel like they belong here is affinity spaces are very important. But to go beyond that, now, how do we help our teachers of color understand how their career will progress during their tenure here in Ankeny? What are the opportunities? Who are the people within the district that they can connect to? And then when you have, in my case, when you have our population of minority educators is so small, how do we extend that network into the Des Moines Metro to connect them with other educators, other supervisors, other principals in the school district? The last point that I want to make with regards to the sense of belonging is just the importance of managers, and specifically for teachers and paraeducators, the importance of our principals in that onboarding and retention of them. And so people leave because of the people that supervise them. And so if we don't provide development for our principals, for our assistant principals, on how they are providing feedback, how they're observing, how they're giving feedback to these educators, we've not done our job. And so we've actively been attempting to ensure that our principals and APs are actively observing our teachers, giving meaningful feedback, and they're in contact with our HR department with regards to how they can progress through the district. But then again, in a district of 12,800 students, the opportunities always don't come up as fast as they would in an LA Unified or Chicago Public Schools. And so our job, and we can't be selfish, is how do we train people up, provide them with those technical skills to do their jobs really well, but then those people that have aspirations outside of the classroom, how do we also build their skills around working with people? How do we build their skill set and capacity around strategic planning that allows them to move into positions outside the classroom?
Thank you so much for sharing those examples. I am loving the distinct connection of how we're thinking about a whole teacher's journey in retention, from sort of the preparation stage through their in-service stage and what that professional growth looks like. And so I am going to kick it back to you, Valerie, in thinking about innovation. I think we're really at this point in time where a lot of folks, we know what the problems are around retention, and folks are now in a space of how do we solve this? How are we innovative at these different levels of a teacher's journey? So from your perspective, what innovative policies have teacher preparation programs and partnering school districts implemented that you believe have contributed to greater success and likelihood of retention amongst novice teachers, and possibly how we might adapt these models to other contexts nationwide?
Yeah, well, just touching on this idea of kind of career ladder and progressive wage schedules, I think one thing to think about is how are pre-service teachers being thought of within that kind of career ladder or as part of that progressive wage schedule? We want teachers, aspiring teachers, to have clinically rich preparation experiences. And in those experiences, whether that's high impact tutoring or student teaching or substitute teaching, they're actually providing instructional services for a district. And so we've seen examples of aspiring teachers being compensated for those instructional services, which is both kind of offsetting some of the financial barriers that aspiring teachers have, and recognizing them for the services they're providing and ensuring they get these very clinically rich experiences that will better prepare them and equip them to stay in the classroom for longer. So in Minnesota, for example, they have a student teacher grant program, which provides financial assistance to students enrolled in educator preparation programs while they're completing their student teaching experience. I think another thing that is really important, Dr. Pruitt talked about training and support for principals and APs and how are they observing and providing feedback and coaching. We've also seen great examples of EPPs and districts coming together to think about, from kind of pre-service, like the mentor teacher role, and then in service, the induction coach and induction support role, really investing in some of the training and selection for those mentor teachers and those induction coaches, and thinking about the matching of those, kind of as was talked about in the Ankeny example. So really thinking about how are we making sure that the mentors and the induction coaches are provided with training around how to support these educators so that they can stay in the profession, that they're equipped to value and affirm the identities of teachers of color, that they're being fairly compensated for their times. I think one other thing we've seen really productive EPP and district partnerships around are when there are expectations for what districts want teachers to be able to do when they get into the classroom, whether that is around how they expect early literacy to be taught, for example, or the use of high quality instructional materials, which we know has the ability to both ensure that kids have equitable access to rigorous instruction, but also can reduce and lighten the load for novice teachers in their planning work so that they can focus their attention on building relationships with students. We've seen districts and EPPs make really intentional partnerships around that, where districts are saying, these are the high quality instructional materials that we want our teachers to be using, for example, and bringing their prep partners into that conversation, saying, what should they be learning about using materials and intellectual preparation, so that when they come into the district, they're prepared and they're not having to learn a whole bunch of things new on top of kind of being in charge of the classroom for the first time. So really thinking about those partnerships as a way to smooth the continuum from pre-service to in-service and lighten some of the load that we're putting on these novice teachers, and the hopes that they'll stay. I guess the last thing I'll say is there are some really interesting innovations. The Black Educator Initiative, which is run by the National Center for Teacher Residencies, has a network of teacher residencies that are supporting Black educators. And they've been doing some things in order to reduce the financial barriers for aspiring teachers, in order to help make sure that they can persist through that preparation and into the profession. So for example, many of the residencies in that network have emergency funds for aspiring teachers that really kind of make the difference between those folks staying or quitting. So those funds can be used to help with a utility bill or an unexpected car expense or whatever it is. And those that flexibility on financial resources has enabled their Black residents to persist in those programs, which are really kind of high quality programs, and continue into the profession.
Dr. Pruitt, would you like to add, I think, to Valerie's comments about development and career advancement? I'm just curious about what some practical steps might be that districts can take to support this trajectory of professional development and career advancement, especially for educators of color. Oh, you're on mute.
Absolutely. I think that if you think about when we start in the classroom with teachers, to varying levels, a teacher is using strategic planning, they're using their people skills and technical skills. For teachers, they tend to focus a lot on the technical skills, but as your career advances, we don't rely as much on those technical skills as much as we do the strategic knowledge and the people skills that are needed to work outside of the classroom. And so I think that what we can do, some practical ways of supporting teachers while they're in the classroom, is do everything we can to be very targeted in the type of professional learning we're providing our teachers based off of where they are in their career. And so with regards to their technical skills. And so for our teachers, 1 to 5 years, they'll need a specific type of professional learning to help them orientate themselves to the classroom with planning, with collaborating, with working with the families and students in their classrooms versus a teacher that has 30 years of experience. And so we need to be very targeted, I believe, in how we approach that, which makes our partnership here in Ankeny with CultureAmp really exciting, because we'll have a data set, more data available to us to get the type of feedback we need from our teachers, our school leaders around the professional development that we are offering. Is it actually doing what we think it is? And is it filling that bucket for our teachers that we believe that we want? And if not, we're able to pivot. I think also some practical ways of supporting development is the use of our mentors and coaches that we have access to across our district. I mentioned earlier that last year we implemented professional learning specifically for our brand new teachers. And so if we can get better at targeting their needs based off of what they're experiencing in the moment, I think we're able to do a more on-the-job training and triage to make sure that, one, they feel supported, but then also based off their feedback, we can put their coaches or mentors into their classrooms to either co-teach, to observe, or to do model lessons to be that additional support during the course of their career. And then again, with regards to career advancement, I think for districts at the district level, partnerships with organizations like MCEL or new leaders can be invaluable for our teachers of color that aspire to, one, build their capacity in the classroom, but then also have aspirations outside of the classrooms during the course of their career.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pruitt. I want to make sure that we have enough time for the live audience Q&A. So Jacob, I'm going to have you round us out in this discussion as we think about the voices of educators of color and just thinking about our role in involving them in the process of retention strategies to allow them to stay. How do you ensure the voices of educators of color are heard and valued in those decision-making processes? And what does that look like, and how has that contributed to retention in your context?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question because this is something where I feel like we've had some growth over the last year. First, I've got I see Dr. Hughes on here from Teach Plus, and I just want to shout out how instrumental they have been in helping LA Unified raise up voices from our teacher leaders, people who are doing the work on campus, and they provided us with a vehicle that allowed us to listen to what they were saying in a more organized way so that all of our decision makers at the district level could take that into account before moving forward. And I think it's important to engage with partners so that they can provide a safe space where people aren't only sharing their insights with evaluators, right? They're sharing it with people who are mission aligned and who can help them raise that voice. The other thing that's important from a central office perspective is I had the pleasure of being able to attend a training by Harrison Peters and MCEL last year. And we were implored to, if you're in the central office, get into schools, get into classrooms. And so over this last year, we've taken a lot of time to visit our priority schools and Black Student Achievement Plan schools and talk to principals about human capital management strategies, right? Like, do you have a stay interview? If so, do you have a template? At what frequency are you meeting with your early career teachers to survey them about the supports that they need and how they're feeling? But also while we're there, I would pull teachers out and I would ask like, hey, how are you feeling? Like, do you need a connection to your credential program? Are you on track? Here's my card. You always have someone who's here. And just by doing that and making myself present, I was able to have conversations with many early career educators of color who needed somebody to talk to. And so I would say that we need to look for partners who are going to help us facilitate those important conversations, like Teach Plus, but also we just need to get into those classrooms. And the thing that was the biggest learning for me is we should not be asking our educators for feedback if we're not ready to listen. Because if we're going to ask the question, we're likely going to hear something that's going to implore us to make a change. It doesn't mean that we have to change everything, but we have to go in willing to make a change, because the worst thing that we can do is ask for the feedback and then not incorporate any of it. And to Dr. Pruitt's point, that's when you see teachers leaving their leaders or quitting their principal, because it's like, hey, I went out on a limb and I told you and made myself vulnerable. And now I'm still not getting the support that I said that I needed. This must not be the place for me.
Thank you all so much for just sharing your thoughts and from where you sit in this very important work. We're going to transition to the Q&A portion. So I encourage audience members to please continue dropping your questions in. We'll take the next 8 minutes or so to engage our panelists in what's top of mind for you. So this first question is for you, Dr. Pruitt. For Ankony's work with the Para to Educator pathway, does the district partner with a local university for low-cost credentialing?
As Jody had pointed out earlier, we identified 4 colleges and universities across the state and outside the state that provides that low cost to our paraeducators. And then we're attempting to identify ways to supplement that learning through the district with some grants that we could potentially offer those employees that take advantage of those opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt. I think this next question is open for any of you to chime in on. So many of the panelists' comments showed the connections between preparation, recruitment, hiring, and retention. These components are so intertwined and interconnected, but many systems keep them separate or siloed. Do the panelists have advice on how to approach these systems through a holistic approach for practitioners and for policymakers?
I'll take a stab at it. And so I think that I agree, it can't be siloed, and part of the work from our HR department has been figuring out how do we make everyone key members of our team across the district part of the recruitment process, in addition to our retention. And that's where I come in with regards to bringing the team together, working with Jody, but then more importantly, how I keep our school board informed that might influence policy or admin regulations with regards to how we approach that work here in Ankeny.
I think similarly, it's about getting the right people around the table, right? Who is being involved in the conversations, and from our perspective at Deans for Impact, how are educator preparation programs in districts coming together and talking about some of these bigger questions beyond just preparation, but what are the roles what are the ways that partnership can support all of these different pieces around recruitment, retention, preparation, career ladder, all of those things.
Jacob, this next question is for you. In LAUSD, what are you seeing in terms of opportunities and challenges presented by California's expansion of transitional kindergarten in regard to recruiting and retaining high school students and paras into the teaching profession?
Yeah, I don't know that we've had a direct impact on recruiting paras into the profession. I think that on the one hand, there are a lot of folks who are really fascinated by being able to get into early childhood education, where they can also be a credentialed teacher and earn a salary as a K-12 teacher, right? Because we know in early ed, not only under-resourced, but our teachers don't get paid enough. So I think it's created more of a market of folks who are interested in getting into the profession. But in practice right now, for us as a district, we've just seen that we have a shortage of qualified credentialed teachers who have the requisite number of units in child development or early childhood ed to be able to teach in a transitional kindergarten setting. And we know that that's the whole reason why the expansion is going into place, is so that our families have qualified educators who are able to meet students' needs at that age. But we do think that this is an opportunity for us to expand the number of qualified educators who will be able to teach TK students.
Thank you. Our final question, which is also open to any of you to respond to. One consistent challenge we hear with retention from district and state leaders is a lack of capacity for the supports that we know are effective at curbing attrition: mentorship, expanded professional networks, costs for exposure and learning, etc. How have you seen systems identify creative solutions to be responsive to educators' needs?
I'll start off. I'm repeating myself. I truly believe when it comes to teachers and retention, the principal is by far a district's greatest lever. And so anything that I can do to build the capacity of my principal and my assistant principals, I think goes a long way with regards to providing the appropriate amount of support to our teachers of color with regards to being able to retain them. Specifically for our teachers of color and looking at the principal and the AP, if you happen not to have principals or administrators of color, then is my job. And so again, much smaller district than LA Unified, 12,800 students. And so I believe it's my responsibility when we don't have as many administrators of color to take that on with regards to bringing them in, talking to them, talking about the importance of building their ability to be great teachers, but then also charting out a path and sharing advice with regards to what they need to do in order to progress throughout their career. And if they desire to sit in the seat that I sit in or sit in the seat of their current principal. But again, the principal and AP are the supports that districts should pour their resources in and develop them in order to keep teachers in the classroom.
And Dr. Pruitt, I just have to echo that because, you know, so often, like I have to realize that nobody is either staying in the classroom or leaving the profession because of me or someone else in HR. Like that's not relevant to their decision making. But also I can't just say like, hey, it's the principal's responsibility to retain. As a leader, I need to help build their capacity in human capital management. And so one thing that we did is we identified 5 or 6 different buckets of work under the domain of human capital management. And we put together different 1-hour series, and we paid our principals to come and learn more about human capital management and specifically how to recruit and retain diverse educators. So not only are we intentionally setting the expectation with our school leaders, we're also handing something to them and saying, you don't have to do all of this, but you do need to do some of this. And then you can use the tools that are going to be most tailored to your school community to move this work forward. But just know that inaction is saying something, and our teachers are going to hear that and act accordingly.
The only other thing I would add is I think looking outside of the system for resources is another way to tackle this. So, you know, other organizations like in Tennessee, there's the Tennessee Educator of Color Alliance, where they're providing kind of leadership and mentorship opportunities and affinity group spaces for both pre-service and in-service teachers of color. So kind of an outside organization. Again, EPPs as a partner, how could districts leverage some of those organizations to do some of the support work around training mentors and things like that. So I think in addition to, I totally agree with Dr. Pruitt and Jacob about investing in leaders within the system. And then how do you think about going outside of the system in order to find additional resources and supports for the work?
Thank you all so much for this dynamic discussion. I know that we are right at time, so I'm going to quickly close us out. Thank you again to our panelists and the 1 Million Teachers of Color Campaign Steering Committee members, especially those who are on the call today. We have folks from MCEL, Teach Plus, TNTP, and the Hunt Institute. Additionally, a thank you to members from the California Educator Diversity Action Network who are also on this call as well. Another thank you to our amazing panelists. As we wrap up, we are sharing a link to our feedback survey again so that we can capture your experience after today's webinar. The survey should take you just 1 to 2 minutes to complete and is helpful to us in continuing to offer high quality content on disseminating best practices around educator diversity. Please, please, please take a moment to complete that survey. And thank you for attending today's webinar. As a reminder, we will follow up with the recording and resources in a separate email. Please consider joining the campaign to stay up to date on our initiatives and gain access to comprehensive resources that support educator diversity. It really takes all of us in coalition to close the representation gap in our teacher and leader pipelines. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and we look forward to seeing you at our next one. Take care.